If you'd like to, please go ahead and turn to Proverbs chapter 29. Proverbs chapter 29. A week from today, so next Sunday, would have been my Nana's birthday. And something happened, I guess it was yesterday, that reminded me of her. My littlest daughter, Aubrey, who I think all of y'all know, she is a physical touch. And if you haven't read the 5 love languages, I encourage you to read the 5 love languages. And they make a book for kids too. But she is a physical touch, so she wants to be held. She wants to have interaction. And by the way, I'm also physical touch. I like to hug people. This pandemic has kind of squashed that, but I like to hug people. But anyway, she climbed in my lap, and out of nowhere, she was cuddling with me, and she said, "Daddy, you know what?" I said, "What?" She said, "God," and she likes to talk with her hands. She said, "God created everything." I said, "Yes, he did." I said, "How do you know that?" And if you knew my Nana, you'll remember this. She had a very snarky remark. She said, "The Bible, duh." So I wanted to start off on a funny note, but if you look in Proverbs chapter 29, in verse 18, I talked this morning, and if you weren't here, I'm going to try to quickly recap. I talked this morning about unity and the fact that we as Christians need to be united, and there are any number of things out there today that will cause division among us. And if we think that the devil is not behind each and every single one of them, we're wrong. The devil is out there trying to divide us. And as we think about that, as we think about the fact that he is trying to cause division, and it's not just in the world. I mean, he's definitely trying to cause division in the world because he knows division in the world tends to find its way into the church. And so he's out there actively, as Peter says in 1 Peter, he's roaming around as a lion, seeking whom he may devour. And he has the world, he's not worried about the world. He's not worried about getting their attention or causing them division. He's worried about causing us division, but he's smart enough to know that if he causes division out there, that the division is going to find its way into the church. And so we as Christians have to understand what our goal is. And we'll turn there in just a moment, but I'll refer to Matthew chapter 28. As Jesus is getting ready to ascend into heaven, those that are looking on at that moment, he's giving them an instruction, and he's telling them, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and in earth." He says, "Go therefore and teach and preach." And as I said, we'll look there in just a moment. But the proverb writer here in verse 18 makes a very powerful statement that even I used to overlook. As I would read through Proverbs, I would kind of glance past some of the things that the proverb writer said. But he makes a very powerful statement in verse 18. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version. He says, where there is no prophetic vision, people cast off restraint. I think it's the New Living Translation. while I don't endorse that translation, says, where there is no vision, the people fail. So as you think about what is being said there, where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. Where there is no vision, the people fail. You know, this year is the year of 2020. And I remember at the beginning of the year, a lot of churches came out and said, we have a 2020 vision. We have a vision for how we're going to go forward. We have a vision for how we're going to move forward, how we're going to win more souls. We have a 2020 vision. And I don't know what God has in store. I don't know the mind of God. His ways are higher than my ways. Isaiah chapter 55 and verse 8. But I almost wonder if all the things that have happened in 2020 was God letting us know that while we thought we had a vision, we didn't. Because we don't know His ways. We don't know what He has in store. But what we can control is the goals that we set for ourselves. The goals that we set individually. So I think Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 18, I think the wisdom that is imparted there by the proverb writer applies both to us as individuals and it applies to us as a congregation and it applies to us as a church. Where there is no vision, the people fail. Where you don't have goals, when you don't have goals, you're not going to succeed. Our vision is given to us, I believe. People might disagree, but I believe in Matthew chapter 28, beginning in verse 16. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, and some doubted. It's interesting that as you read that, some of them doubted. They had been with him for 3.5, 4 years-ish. They had been with him. They had seen everything he had done. He had shown them that he had risen from the dead, and they still doubted. So I guess what I take from that is when sometimes I still doubt, I think it's okay. I shouldn't doubt. I should work on that, but that's a little bit of a tangent. And Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. You know, as we think about what Jesus is saying here, this is called the Great Commission, right? We commonly know this as the Great Commission. This is Jesus instructing his followers with a message that still rings true through the ages until today, that we must go forth, means go out and teach. As we think about these words, as we think about what Jesus is truly saying here, we as Christians need to understand that this should be our vision. This should be the vision that we have set for ourselves. Now, going back to the point I made this morning, Satan wants to blur that vision. We have a 2020 vision, right? But what he wants to do is to cause us to lose sight of that vision. And so Satan, I believe, is behind the fact that we have a pandemic. Satan is behind the social unrest that we have. Satan is behind the racism that we're seeing. You know, you think about the life of Job, and I'm just going to use this as a brief metaphor, but you think about the life of Job. What did God cause Job all of those problems, or did God simply allow Satan to cause those problems? God allowed Satan to cause those problems in Job's life. The example in the story that I used this morning was that of Dakota Meyer, and the fact that he won the Medal of Honor for going into fire at least 7 times to recover at least 36 U.S. personnel and also Afghan personnel. I use that example because he had a vision in mind. His vision was to save those that he cared for. Our vision as Christians should be that we save those that we care for. Now, who do we care for? Begs the question. Who is my neighbor? We know the example of the Good Samaritan. We know that story. We know the fact that Jesus told that story, and he posed the question, who was the neighbor to the beaten man? And it was the Samaritan. Why? Because he stopped, took time out of his day to take care of someone else. You know, one of the things that I often think about is, how do we serve other people? How do I serve those that are around me? Because using the example that I used of Dakota Meyer, and he was serving those people that he was with that day. He wasn't able to save all of them, but he did his best. But he had a common vision in mind. And so I asked myself, how can I serve the people that I'm with? Jesus gives us a really good example in Matthew chapter 20 of how to serve. But I don't want this point to only sound like I'm talking about serving our fellow Christians. I want this to sound like, how do we serve our fellow man? How do we keep the devil and what he's doing out there causing the division? How do we keep that out of the church, and how do we simply decide that no matter what happens, we're still going to serve our fellow Christian? And even in this situation, in Matthew chapter 20, what Jesus is doing is washing the feet of the person who's going to betray him. Beginning in verse 26, it's John, isn't it? It's not Matthew, it's John. Sorry. John chapter 20. No, it's not John 20. John 13, thank you. I wrote it down wrong up here, apparently. John chapter 13. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said unto them, do you understand what I have done? So I'm glossing past the fact that he has already washed their feet. You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, and you also ought to wash one another's feet. How do we wash other people's feet? Now, this was a custom at the time, and so, we've done away with this, and everybody has a shower at home and can wash their own feet, right? But how do we serve in this way? And still, keep in your mind the fact that Judas was here at the time. Jesus washed the feet of his betrayer. And he did it with love. He did it because he cared. You know, we oftentimes, again, I guess going back to a point that I made this morning, we allow what's going on in the world to cause division among us, and we allow it to then filter into the church. And so when so-and-so needs help, we think to ourselves, well, I'm not going to help them. I'm not going to go out of my way to do anything for them because I disagree with them on politics, because I disagree with them on the pandemic, because I disagree with them on how we treat the other races and things like that. So I'm not going to help them because of that. But Jesus here is showing us that even though he knows, Jesus knew what was about to happen. Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him. And he still washed his feet. He still got down on his knees with a basin of water. He used his garment, the clothes that he was wearing, to wash them and then dry them off. But then, for some reason in the church today, we allow ourselves to think about so much what's going on out there in the world, and this is your political belief and this is my political belief, and so therefore we can't be friends. But Jesus gave us the example that even though you're going to betray me, even though you're going to hand me over to the people that are going to kill me, I'm still going to serve you. It's not easy. What I'm talking about is not easy, and I said it this morning, I'll say it again. I'm talking to myself more than I'm talking to anybody here, so I'll just keep that idea in place. But why can't we be like Jesus? Hebrews chapter 12. This is something that I try to remind myself of often, and it doesn't only apply to what I'm talking about now, it applies more broadly. It especially applies if you're trying to get on some kind of exercise regimen and lose weight and do what's right. But the point I'm getting at in this context is what we read in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 11 is, for the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So let me try to put this into context for what's going on today. Right now, in this political environment that we're in, I may disagree with you, but I'm still going to try to love you. I'm still going to work hard to love you. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but later on, again, I think this is the New Living Translation, but later on, it yields a harvest of righteousness. So I may not disagree with you, or I may not agree with you politically, but I'm still going to love you. And even though it hurts, I'm still going to work to do it. We may not agree on if you should wear a mask or not, but regardless, I'm still going to love you. Right now it hurts, but later on it's going to yield a harvest of righteousness. I may not agree with you on whether on the statement of Black Lives Matter, and let me give a caveat. I don't have any problems with any of these phrases. But I think they're more to divide us than anything else. So let me just say that, and know that I love each and every single one of you. It doesn't matter. But you may say Black Lives Matter, and I may say all lives matter, and we may disagree on it, but guess what? I'm going to love you no matter what, because no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but later on it yields a harvest of righteousness. I know, based on Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36, that I have to love my neighbor as myself. I have to love the Lord my God with all my heart, mind, and soul. So even if we disagree on certain phrases and statements and things like that, we still have to love each other. Satan is trying to divide us. We can't let that happen. I want, more than anything, for the church to follow the example. Unfortunately, I want us to follow the example of Jesus. But I want to put it into more current terms, into an example that I feel is tangible. Maybe you don't feel it's tangible, but when the Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer went into a firefight in a valley, his enemy had the upward position, the high position. He went into there at least 7 times. He rescued 36 American and Afghan soldiers. He didn't care about all of the other stuff that was going on. He didn't care about all of the incoming artillery fire that he was facing. All he cared about was his fellow soldier. I want us as Christians to only care about our fellow Christians. And with that, the lesson is yours. I'll offer an invitation for anyone that would like to come and put Christ on in baptism, to be raised to walk in a new life, to have access to all the great and precious promises that are described in Scripture. If you would like to do that this evening, we certainly offer you that invitation.